Welcome back, everyone. And you're in breakout session 1 this morning, where we're going to be talking about the contemporary challenges in construction. I'm Ralph Montague, board member at CETA and also director at ARCDOX BIM Consultants. We have 3 exciting speakers this morning, talking about the diversity in construction with Elia González Salas from KOSMOS, and then we're going to be looking at the preview of the latest NBS BIM survey, or digital construction survey, sorry, with David Bain from the NBS. And then we'll be talking about a critical review of the requirements of quantity surveyors for collaborative BIM engagement and success with Mary Flynn from Dublin City Council. So first up, I'd like to introduce Elia González Salas from KOSMOS, who will be talking about the diversity in construction. Elia, over to you.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for attending this presentation. I'm happy I can take the first slot, so everybody's fresh, I hope. I wanted to talk about a topic that I believe everybody can relate to, which is diversity in digital construction and BIM, which is also a BIM information environment. Right, building information model. I think that most or the main challenge we are facing is underrepresentation in construction. This is my organization, and I believe that if not you probably have many of your colleagues that can relate to any of these circumstances. I'm pretty sure you have a female colleague. I'm a quantity surveyor, which is let's say I'm one of the unicorns, right? We are very, very few women in quantity surveying. I'm also a foreigner. I'm working in Denmark, and that means that I'm often the only foreigner in the teams I'm working with. Often I'm also the only quantity surveyor because this is a profession that is underrepresented in the Nordics. It's not a profession that has an educational program in the university, meaning that the teams are not used to work with quantity surveyors as part of the project organization. I also happen to be the youngest in the company. This is me in the entire organization. And I think this is a very common situation for many women working on quantity surveyors, companies that are working abroad. I've taught 4 main topics in my introduction. The first one was gender. I think that any woman working on construction is used to an industry mostly dominated by tradition, driven by men, and very local and national, very conservative. Another topic I taught on the intro was the background. We are used to foreigners in our country working on unqualified positions, but what about the ones that are also working as qualified professionals? They are also bringing their foreign practices and precious knowledge of different processes performed in different regions and different areas of the industry itself, not only talking about different countries, but also talking about different practices into construction. Age. I'm the youngest, and that means that often is associated with less experience. Yes, we have less experience in life, that's true. But when it comes to professional skills, we also bring a fresh mindset, which is necessary for disrupting the current processes and creating a change, create a real change with a different way of different perspectives, different ways of seeing how things could be improved and could be done in a different way. And a different profession. I was mentioning quantity surveying being a different practice in the Nordics, but it also relates to new technologies. We are now having new profiles in our project teams. One of them would be BIM related profiles. And that means that we are facing new challenges, different challenges. We are proposing new practices, and this pioneering mindset is needed to evolve the industry. So different backgrounds can bring great opportunities to your teams as well. So if we put them all together, different backgrounds, different ages, different genders, and different profiles, different professions, we get something that I call magic, which is the square in between, where all these profiles merge together. That small spot is where everybody feels comfortable, where everybody feels they belong, where everybody feels comfortable enough to share who they really are, to propose what they really think, and to contribute for the team and your company to really thrive as a whole. I would like to talk about women quantity surveyors. I'm going to reference the RICS conference ratios. They gave me some figures recently. While it has increased by 4% in the last 3 years, it is, as we can see in this very beautiful chart, 3 times less than men participants. I think this is shocking. If we are 50% women in the global population, this clearly represents the underrepresentation of women as quantity surveyors. If we refer to the whole industry, to the whole construction industry, I'm going to refer to my colleague David. He's going to present more detailed results on the survey they have recently run. But those figures totally match with these ratios. Globally, only 22% of women have answered the survey, and it comes down to 13% in Ireland. I think those numbers represent quite clearly that we are not having a strong presence, that the teams are not getting benefits of having our different perspective and our different way of doing things, or just to contribute to the teams, and more importantly to create a precedent. Often having a label in front of our profile, women quantity surveyor, that may belittle my profile, but also it will highlight that we are there. It will encourage more women, more young women, to actually join the profession and choose it as a career path. I think I'm just taking this map from the RICS recent report published in 2020. There is a 2% of women more every year, which is quite cool. You know, it's increasing, but it's not fast enough. I think that is such a beautiful career in need of professionals, and we are there. And then the question is why we are not choosing quantity surveying as a professional career, right? Only 28%, 23% around in Europe still, even though we are meant to be, you know, like it's been such a hot topic recently, and still, you know, numbers are not getting better. And I believe that this is because we are underrepresented. It makes much difficult to prove that you are equally valid to the rest if that's not considered as normal. When something is abnormal, it means that you need to prove your value harder. I'm just going to take 3 current profiles, 3 new profiles you probably have heard about, but that we are not familiar with yet. One is BIM, as a collaborative environment. The other one is digital transformation strategies. Everybody has heard about them. Everybody has touched them. Data management in construction, very important. Data collection, data structuring, like considered as an IT profile, but we need to touch down in construction as well. They are needed. It is going to be the future. Everybody knows it's coming. Most of the companies are already investing on it. And by logic, the benefit is clear. But still, why and how are they valuable? This always needs to be proved. And why? Because this is not the norm in construction. In the very same way, other minorities are prejudged. There is a fear to be the one that stands out in the project, in the meeting room. And that's why I want to call to all women that want to change their career to consider BIM, digital transformation, and data management as options. There is a huge need for these professionals in the industry. There is a great gap, and it is such a fantastic career to choose. It's innovative, it's open-minded, and there is room for everybody to be there. To all quantity surveyors to also shift into the 5D, fifth dimension, BIM strategies, a more digital process. The more presence we have, women, quantity surveyors doing BIM in the industry, the more young women and guys will choose a career path in this direction. Recently, 2 years ago, actually, not that recent, I attended a meeting where we all were women. Out of the 7 people attending it, all project directors, project managers, discipline leads were women, except one of my colleagues, a man. After the meeting, he approached me and he referred to it as how uncommon that situation was to him, how nervous and how this unsettling feeling of not being comfortable, of being out of place had been because of how unusual the situation was. The most worrying thing is that I was also in that meeting and I also noticed that, not that he was nervous or anything, but I noticed that it was an uncommon situation to me to be surrounded by so many women in a construction meeting. Then I got back to him like, all right, I totally relate to how you felt, because if you think about it, I'm the only woman in the department. Every single week we have a meeting and I'm the only woman there. And in every single project I've worked, I'm always the only woman, the youngest and the foreigner in the team. How do you think I feel every time I raise the voice? I also feel unsettled. I also feel a bit uncomfortable, and I feel special, not necessarily on the good way. That obviously is overwhelming, and that may bring back a lot of women that has been in this profession to actually shift to different sides of the branch and in the industry. It's sad, but suddenly, like, it's sad, but we also know how to fix that, right? We need to incorporate different profiles, different backgrounds, cultural. We need to bring different skills, different profiles, not necessarily the traditional quantity surveyor, the traditional project manager, but what about disrupting that and bringing someone with IT skills, with teaching skills, to try different ways and different processes. We need to highlight that we are there. We are underrepresented, but we are at 22%, and I still don't see 1 out of 4 presenters in the conferences. We need to show that we are there to encourage other women to join the career, their professional path as quantity surveyors. We need to encourage other quantity surveyors, men also, to join the 5D, the digital branch of it. I'm talking about quantity surveyors, but this relates to every single profile in the construction branch. And I'm talking also about women, but this applies to all underrepresented collectives, minorities, with different professional profiles, with different ages, with different cultural backgrounds. Don't feel left alone. You are going to be part of a pioneering disruption in the industry, and that's that's amazing. We are making history, I think, and we are also gonna evolve the most traditional and conservative industry that is exists at the moment, which is construction, and that is great, very exciting. Thank you very much. I'm very glad to have been presenting here. If you want to follow us and hear more about some of the disrupting practices we are making in industry about digitalizing and also breaking conservative and traditional ways of working, you can join us in LinkedIn. Save our contact. We have presence in Denmark and in Ireland. And thank you very much. I'm looking forward to listen the next conference and the results of this survey about digital construction that is coming next.
Yeah. Thank you, Elia. That was excellent. It's a great call to everybody in the industry to wake up and maximize the potential, I suppose, that's out there in a more diverse group of people. Okay. Next up, we have David Bain from the NBS, who's going to be giving us an sort of a preview of the headline findings of the most recent NBS Digital Construction Survey. David, you're very welcome, and we look forward to hearing your presentation.
Morning everyone. Thank you for inviting me today, and thanks for everybody's time. This is the latest in our digital construction survey, which we've kind of evolved from the BIM survey, which some people might know that we've been running for quite a few years now. This is actually the first time that we will have shared this year's results publicly. So actually kind of launching them next week, but we were happy to come and talk a little bit about them here. So yes, we've been doing the BIM survey for 10 years or so. Started it in 2011 with 400 respondents, and back then a lot of people didn't really know much about BIM. It was quite new to many people. And then over the years we've been tracking the use of BIM, its adoption and various aspects of it, to the point where when we did it last year, pretty much everybody was aware of it, and a majority of people had adopted it in some way. So this year we decided to change things a little bit. So BIM is still important, and there are people that are still new to it, and there's still lots of debate about its benefits and its relevance for people on different types of project. And there are also people who it's day-to-day practice and is fully embedded, and they're reaping the benefits from it. So we totally understand the importance of talking about it, and the debate still being there. And we do include quite a few questions about BIM in the survey still. But we also wanted to look a bit more broadly at some wider aspects of digital transformation and other technologies that we're seeing that people are using. So that's why we changed things a little bit this year. So we did the survey in sort of April to August time this year, and it's one that people can fill in wherever they are in the world. The majority are in the UK, but a lot of people fill it in other countries. And we worked with CETA to promote it in Ireland, and we're glad to have people based in Ireland completing the survey. We also are grateful to a lot of organisations which support the survey, which helps us to get the response that we do from different sectors of the industry. So this year, these organisations all promoted it to their members and networks. So apart from the first year that we ran the BIM survey, when we had about 400 people responding, we've tended to receive something in the region of about 900, 1,000 respondents. So we're really pleased that people take the time to do it, and that many people fill it in. This year we had 906 respondents, and this year for every response that we received, we donated £1 to construction charity Crash, which helps people who are homeless or people who live in hospices with particular care needs. So we're really pleased to sort of support them as part of the survey as well. So as I said earlier, the majority of people that complete the survey are based in the UK, but as you can see here that we have people across the world taking part, so in all continents apart from Antarctica. Maybe one day someone there will do it, but the proportion of people in the UK is gradually going down compared to the rest, so there is gradually more interest from other parts of the world, which is quite interesting because we can start to get some views from other places. In Ireland, there were 46 people who said that they were based in Ireland who took part in the survey. So it's not a huge sample, which allows us to say really statistically significant things, but I think it's enough for us to draw some comparisons and bring out some kind of indications of what people think, which is what I've done here. So in terms of the organizations and the people that took part, we have a lot of people who are in the kind of consultant, designer, specifier role, which is the history of where we've come from in terms of NBS's focus, and also where the survey kind of really started. But we're keen to grow participation from other parts of the project team, and we do have quite a few people who are describing themselves as contractors or constructors. Over 100 people in that role, and quite a few clients and suppliers as well. In Ireland, they're actually sort of slightly more in the consultant role and the client roles compared to the rest of the sample. And then you can see here the sorts of people that took part in terms of types of organisation and disciplines. Quite a lot of architectural, quite a lot of BIM specialists, especially in Ireland, and then a range of organisation sizes. In terms of individuals, we get a really good wide range of ages. So just kind of referring back to Elia's presentation, I think in terms of age, we're really well represented, and we can actually look at differences by age, and we do find differences in opinion by age sometimes. Gender, as Elia says, is something that we'd really like to see more females completing the survey, but we do realize that's representative of the industry, but still, it's something we would very much encourage and like to see more of. So just to kind of talk about the kind of BIM questions initially. So some of the charts I'm showing are for the survey as a whole, and there are some where I show the results for Ireland too. So the pie chart here shows the results for the survey as a whole, 71% saying that they've adopted BIM. And you can see over time, it's grown since we first started asking it by quite a lot, but it's kind of plateaued in the last few years. That growth hasn't changed massively. In Ireland, the figure is quite similar, 67%. So it is, very similar to the overall. We also find that most people intend to do it. It's something they want to do. They might have plans for, but there are challenges in doing so. And there are a very small number who say it's something they never intend to do. So what does BIM actually mean? We try to look at this a bit more in recent surveys. Because we do find that people have different understanding, different definitions of what they feel BIM is, different kind of day-to-day realities. And you can see here that there are some people who kind of still sort of think of it as working in 3D and producing 3D parametric models. So a third of the whole sample almost described it in that way. That's how they're kind of approaching BIM. It's actually lower in Ireland. And there were more people among the Ireland respondents who were talking about following the International Standard Series 19650. So that's quite interesting. And then quite a lot of people in other parts of the world also, the UK particularly, using the BS 1192 series of BIM level 2. And then in terms of kind of actual things people are doing, again, trying to understand it a bit more, we asked people about some of the tasks and activities that are outlined in the 19650 standards. So things like BIM execution plans, 2/3 of people talk about how they've been involved in those in some way. They might have prepared them, or they might have been involved in reviewing them. And then you can see a whole range of other things that people are involved with here. I've picked out some of the ones where people in Ireland were more likely to have done them. So been involved with information production methods and procedures, or the detailed responsibility matrix. So there's a few things there, but you can see the pattern is it's quite similar. And we also talk about information sharing and people following conventions for doing that, and the formats they're using to do that. So it's quite positive here, and this might be in reflection of there being quite a few people in BIM specialist roles in Ireland, but a lot of people saying that they follow a naming convention, that they indicate what the information should be used for, highlighting amendments, that kind of thing. In terms of the sort of formats of sharing information, it's a similar pattern to the rest of the sample. So 40% saying they do that in IFC, 23% sort of doing Kobe drops. And then in terms of classification, 43% said that they were involved in projects that used Uniclass as a classification system. So, and those things have actually hovered around those numbers for kind of last few years for us. It's not grown massively. I suppose perhaps the Uniclass is the one that's maybe steadily seems to be increasing slightly. And if you look at the other chart on the right, when we ask people about the classifications that are most commonly used, Uniclass 2015, according to the information here, does look to be the one that is most commonly used, certainly by respondents in Ireland, but also in other places, also including the UK. The common arrangement of work sections in the UK has been used traditionally for a long time, but this is suggesting that perhaps Uniclass 2015 might actually be being used more than that now. So it's been the norm. Some people think it is. So just over half here feel that it's the norm in their country. But there's still quite a lot of people who aren't sure about that. Quite a lot of people disagreeing. And among those people in Ireland, it's kind of balanced. You know, just you see here, just about a third think it's the norm, about a third disagree with that. So it's a mixed view on that one, and you can see some of the comments here about why people think that is. So that's a quick kind of whiz through the BIM focused findings, but we talk about digital transformation a bit more generally. And we ask people to sort of think of it as a journey and where they might be on the journey. And we can see here that this is for everybody that filled in the survey. Most people feel they've been on some kind of journey for a while. And this is very similar in Ireland as well. So there's a recognition that we're in this time where there's this digital transformation happening, and that they're kind of in that moment. And in terms of the technologies that people are adopting, we've seen a lot of people using cloud computing, which is kind of unsurprising, I think, over the last couple of years as well. In particular, I'm sure that the pandemic has been part of driving that up. Among the Irish respondents, everybody is saying that they're using that. And then you can see things like offsite construction, being quite significant. There's a big difference here on VR and AR and sort of mixed reality and those things. People in Ireland saying they're using them quite a lot, whereas it's, over the sample as a whole, it's stayed about a third. And then we ask a bit about some of the issues around this. So is the government kind of leading the way and helping with digital transformation? There's quite a lot of people among the Ireland respondents disagreeing with that. So that was quite an interesting one that stood out as being a bit different from the rest of the sample. And then to pick up kind of one of the points mentioned earlier in the introduction, all of this is only really of any value if it's actually having a positive outcome for people and the built environment. So you can see here that there is a consensus that people do feel that digital construction is helping to create better buildings, more sustainable and safer outcomes, which is obviously really positive. And just to pick up a couple of things about how the pandemic seems to have kind of affected things. Most people agree that the coronavirus has accelerated the adoption of digital. And a lot of people are talking about over the next 5 years splitting their time between home, office, factory, on site, rather than just kind of wholesale going back to the office if they've been working at home. So a bit of a kind of change in working practices there. So a few kind of closing thoughts quickly, really. So there's that agreement in positive outcomes that digital is having. BIM's still a really big key part of that now and going forward, but it's not the norm in terms of a lot of people's views. The standards are helping and following. Maybe the government could do a little more. And most people are on this journey of adopting digital ways of working. And I hope you don't mind, I just wanted to make kind of one little final plug, which is that this full report that I'm just talking through now will be available from next Wednesday at the NBS.com. And there'll be sort of more there that you can look at if you're interested, and you can view and download. We've also got our own event next Wednesday, focusing on sustainability with some great speakers there, which people might be interested in attending. So, so thank you very much for your time. I hope that's been interesting, and be on later for questions.
Great. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. And those excellent findings. I think it's useful to sort of get the views of what's really happening out there. Next up, we have Mary Flynn from Dublin City Council, and she's going to be presenting a paper on a critical review of the requirements of quantity surveyors for collaborative BIM engagement and success. Mary, you're very welcome. We look forward to hearing your presentation. I think over to you, Mary.
Thank you very much, Ralph. Thank you. As you can see, I wrote this paper, but I must advise that I wrote this paper pre-COVID. So COVID was a major inflection point, and it changed the outcomes of some things. But I will go through the paper very quickly. I have a number of slides, and I will go through them very, very quickly. And the first one is actually I had I have here Shakespeare. He goes, to BIM or not to BIM, that is the question. That would have been a better question pre-COVID, but following the COVID, I think the question to BIM is not optional anymore. We will have to BIM. Now, one of the things I need to make you aware of, that in Ireland, most of the QS practices fall into the SME group, and therein lies the problem, because they are small to medium size, or even micro. Some of them are they're like one-man practices and things like that. So that is a huge thing with regard to QSs getting on board with BIM here in Ireland. And again, the biggest problem I have found, ultimately, the biggest problem to BIM is the mindset. Mindset is the most greatest problem with BIM. Now here we have, in my paper, I looked at things under 4 different categories, basically: people, processes, technology, external influences, and you'll see the process of transition. And the QSs here in Ireland are at various stages. The tier 1 being the large practices, they're obviously at the very end and, you know, leading the way. But there are a number of very small practices who are still getting there or going to go there. They all, I think, following COVID, recognize that digitization is the way forward, and that they really do need to get on board. So I suppose I looked at the people, and one of the things I found in the people, there was about 18 different barriers. But of those barriers, a large number of them apply to engineers, architects, to other professionals, not just the QSs. And then I looked at the processes, and I found there were about 19 different barriers there. And again, you know, there would be typical ones like IPD, or you would have IPD, you would have, for example, intellectual property, you would have, you know, the fact that BIM is not mandated, and a lot of people won't move until such time as BIM is mandated, because we're doing quite well. You know, what we do presently works, so why change it? And I haven't got the time, and the excuses go on and on. But for a lot of people, it's until such time as we must do what we must do, then we will do what we must do, I suppose is the best way to put it. But I am concentrating here on QSs particularly, and one of the things we found was a lot of QS myths that the QSs believed, but not just the QSs. We found that architects and other disciplines believed them as well. And we found that I suppose the big thing was that, you know, that at the press of a button, that little magic red button, you can get a full bill of quantities. And the idea was also that all quantities, you know, reside within the model. And because the quantities come from the model, they must therefore be right. And then there's this idea with this magic little red button, we don't need quantity surveyors anymore. We know all of this now not to be true. And then I looked at the way we perceive BIM. And one of the things I realized was we always seen it as being a cost factor. Now we know that's changed, and there's been you know, the attitude towards BIM has changed significantly in the last 1.5 years. And the COVID has been a big factor in that, but not just COVID, there's climate change, there's a number of other things. And now we see it's not the cost of doing BIM anymore, it's the cost of not doing BIM. And we've moved a long way, like we've gone from clash detection to clash avoidance. So our BIM maturity, our BIM thinking has really moved on. And we recognize now there's a cost to not doing it. We also recognize the huge benefits of doing it. And I suppose from the quantity surveyor point of view, one of the problems was a while back that they were waiting for things to get better, and that they, you know, that BIM models would be more accurate, and there would be, like, BIM in itself was wasn't mature enough, and there was bad BIM models. But one of the things we had to learn was, if we're waiting for everything, for all our ducks to be in a row, we'll be waiting. So we need to just get on with it and get started on it. And we need to also recognize that BIM is an ever-evolving journey, and we're never going to reach the end, because there's always going to be something new on the market. And now that we have the new ARM, the new ARM 5, which is the standard method of measurement, well, generally speaking, for quantity surveyors. Now there are others, SESM and the like, but this now is digitized, and this takes into consideration, this is coded. So for us quantity surveyors, this is a huge improvement. And the same is true of the ICMS2. Now the ICMS2 will be mandated early on next year, but again, that's coded. And again, that's something we'll be able to incorporate into it. Now quantity surveyors, and I won't go through all of these, need to realize that, you know, there's different modeling procedures out there. And even within the same architectural practice, large architectural practices have architects who model different ways. And they need to recognize, you know, that items are missing entirely, but then that's the purpose of us quantity surveyors. Even when we have drawings, we do not have all the information anyway. So we have to input a considerable amount of information ourselves that we know should be there. Not everything is drawn in traditional builds, using traditional builds quantities. And then there's items that are not modeled, or can't be modeled, or won't be modeled. And of course, there's the usual problem with items, you know, being incorrectly labeled. And then you have to look at object detail versus cost detail, which is very, very important. And then, of course, there's the lack of BIM libraries. Now, the NBS, of course, gone a long way towards all of this. And then there was, previous to now, we had the unsuitability of ARM4 because it wasn't digitized and not coded. But again, these, with the passage of time, all these barriers are being addressed. And of course, there's the discipline roles not being fully agreed, defined, understand who's responsible for what. And you have IP roles and things like that. But then the other problems QS has had was, we are basically number crunchers. We're not designers, so we wouldn't have been the most computer literate, because we're very conservative people, and our training and, you know, our college would have been spreadsheets, and, you know, we wouldn't have had a great need to be very, very computer literate. But COVID-19 again changed all that. We now need to get on board. And again, the other problem was we wouldn't necessarily be familiar with all the different data exchange formats, and there are a phenomenal number of them, and we need to understand what they are, and we need to understand what, you know, LED is, level of definition, what we need to understand all these kind of things. Naming conventions is also once you get your head around, it's quite easy. And then there's data drops. But the one thing we need to understand particularly is that as quantity surveyors, we are always going to have the verification and validation process. Just because you have a model doesn't mean everything in it, the quantities are correct, or doesn't mean, you know, that everything is right. And again, we have issues. We have a lot of issues. And I think one of the biggest issues I found is that our training has been very much siloed, and we wouldn't traditionally have trained with architects and engineers and people like that. So architects and engineers and other disciplines would have a hard time getting into the mind of quantity surveyors and how they operate. And I think that's one of the problems, I think. But also the problems is we have a lack of skills, and we have a lack of 5D BIM QS software. And as you can see, we don't have, we do have now, we have Qubit and we have KOSMOS and things like that, but fully integrated software we don't have presently, and we don't have a 5D, you know, QS model view definition, and that is an important thing we don't have. So in other words, we don't have a model view definition that will give us quantity surveyors what we want as quantity surveyors only out of the BIM model, and we can, that's what we need. And again, there's other problems, you know, there's the huge problems as Elia referred to earlier. We have a severe shortage of quantity surveyors. and a severe shortage of fully skilled, BIMmed up quantity surveyors. And again, these are many of the problems we have. But what we have to ask ourselves is, with regard to BIM, and this diagram here shows it very, very well. What are our needs? What do we need to manage? What do we need to operate? What do we need to do? How much will it cost? And we need to look at all the various dimensions, from the 3D to 4D to 5D to 6D to 7D to MD to ND. And as you know, for quantity surveyors, we are 5D BIM. Here is the current situation where we sit outside of the BIM models here. And the wedge, the usual BIM wedge, you'll see where we are. But I argue that quantity surveyors need to engage in BIM and need to industrialize constructions, and the opportunities are just unlimited. Here I give the reasons why we need to do it, and there's a large number of reasons here for doing it. I further go on for why else we need to do it, and these take into consideration also climate action. Like 30% of resources of building sites are wasted. Why? Everyone is paying for it. 40% of landfill is from construction. Climate action. I look also at the problems like the trades are very weather dependent and carbon emissions. I look at productivity, I look at margins. The paper covers a lot of things basically in a nutshell, and these are just an example of what it covers. We also look at off-site manufacturing, lean methods. And then we move on to the model view definition, and this is the important thing. That the purpose of the model view definition is it's a subset of the overall IFA schema, and it describes the data exchange for specific use or purposes or workflows. And for us, this is what we need to develop going forward, and this is going to be the QS model view definition. Then I look at the future QS, 5D BIM QS, and I go, here's the future QS. This is where we are. BIM is in the middle. BIM is giving out what we need. And when you have time to study it, you can look at that. Again, this is the future. I like this one. Can only get better. And here I've also looked at where we are with regard to IFC4. We're using IFC 2x3 at the moment, and as you can see, that gives us a total of 15 properties. But if we move on to IFC4 and further, it gives us greater properties. Like IFC4 is 87 properties. Now the big major game changers, and mind you, these are not in the data analytics is in the paper, but the COVID-19, the climate action, the CSG, these are the big changers. And here I say, like, new QS streams, which is carbon counting, green construction, new emerging materials. Like, who cannot see the benefits of taking BIM on? And for us to get involved in carbon counting and green construction, we need to embrace BIM, and we need to get the information and the data from BIM. But also, since then, we have the new construction sector group, and in it we have the government's intentions, the 7 pillars. And a number of these actions are being carried out right now at the moment. But we're looking at action 3 is modern methods construction. Action 5 is establishing, the skill set for it. And action 7, for example, is the built digital center. These are happening right now. So, and then BIM is really all about data. And at the end of the day, for a QS, it's all about data. And information is as it says there, the oil of the 21st century. Analytics is the combustion engine. And then I've looked at further new QS streams, and these streams come from data and from having all the data we need. And we're talking about intelligent data, and we're talking about, so we can do analytics. And for QSs going forward, we can create data lakes, create data, and we can mine data to drive business value and benefits. And data, again, is an asset, and it has an intrinsic value. And as far as I can see, there's never been a better time in history to be a quantity surveyor than the present, because this is where we're at. So that is a quick run through the paper. I would advise you to read the paper if you're interested in it. It covers a lot more than that. And thank you very much. I'll hand you back over to Ralph.
Thank you, Mary. I greatly appreciate that. That was really interesting. And yeah, I suppose just to bring it to some discussion and some questions and answers, I mean, 3 very useful presentations. And I think obviously there's a common theme that's come out around the costs of projects and quantity surveyors. I think, David, from your study, we could probably see that there's a low level of engagement, I suppose, from the cost management professions in the digital process. And maybe some of that, and this is probably a question to both Mary and Elia as quantity surveyors, like maybe some of that is just a misunderstanding of language. Because, for instance, if I talk to an accountant or a banker and I talk about a financial model, to them that, it's an information model about the finances, and like in terms of language, they understand that. And if you talk to a businessman about a business model, they fully understand that as an information model that contributes to their business. But then you talk to a quantity surveyor about a cost model, and it's a foreign thing to them that they would somehow participate in the BIM process, because an information model about buildings or infrastructure is some sort of foreign thing to quantity surveyors. Do you want to, as quantity surveyors, do you want to comment on that sort of observation of the language?
I think it's, if I could go before Elia, please. I think it's because I've been a quantity surveyor for over 30 odd years. And I think it's because traditionally we have seen models, we think of models in terms of design, and we think of models in terms of architects. We don't think of models in terms of quantity surveyors. We never think, it's not in our terminology, it's not in our psyche, or hasn't been up till now. This is not how we think. We think spreadsheets. That's how we used to think. We think spreadsheets, and I think that's.
Well, a spreadsheet is an information model.
It is, but the terminology wouldn't be. We wouldn't equate a spreadsheet with an information model. I think we would think a model as being a BIM, as being an architectural model.
A 3D model, yeah.
A 3D model. I think that's how we would look at it.
Yeah. So that's a language problem.
It is a language problem. It's just that we're not in that space, and I think we were very slow to engage, because we always seen it as being a problem for designers, generally speaking, not quantity surveyors.
Yeah. Well, and as an architect, I mean, I would say when you could talk about collaboration, like it's easy for an architect to think about collaboration with structure engineers and mechanical services engineers, because we think about the building and how those elements come together. And yet, I think it was you that made the point, Mary, that how do architects understand what quantity surveyors do when they don't participate in the same collaborative process of trying to bring the building together, because they don't want to talk about cost models.
I think the problem lies in that all you guys are designers, and therefore you must by nature collaborate with each other to construct a building. And I think therein lies the problem. Whereas your designers, mechanical engineers must talk to structural engineers, etc. And if you think about it, if you take Revit, for example, you've Revit for mechanical, electrical, you've Revit for architects, you've Revit for structural engineers. You don't have Revit for quantity surveyors. If you get what I'm getting at. So I think therein lies the problem. We should
not have them, because Revit quantity surveyors will be a designer, right? Revit is a designer,
right. Yes,
exactly. A designing software, right? And we don't want to design. It's not in our background. However, we are lacking a profile more technical, maybe a new skill, which is data management, and we have spreadsheets. But the spreadsheets need to be standardized, need to be following a standard, and need to be very strict in terms of structuring this data. And what happens with spreadsheets is that they are very flexible, and they are not really following the same accountancy systems, or this. We need to restrict creativity and freedom on the way we manipulate and input the data, and actually make it interconnected across the entire environment in that regard.
And that's also brings me to another question that was raised in the chat about it's also a language problem. What do you call something, and how do you classify? When we talk about classification, what we're really talking about is naming things consistently across projects, across the professions, across the industry. That's the whole purpose of classification. Is it like when I say door, do we mean the same thing? I say door, I sort of imagine a door and a frame and an architrave and a set of ironmongery, as a complete system. When you say door, you might just be thinking about the door leaf, and not the frame, and not the architrave, and not the the ironmongery. So some people are talking at a whole element level, and other people are talking at a sort of the individual elements or products that make up a system. Is there a problem of language because each profession has their own language?
I don't think so. I think the naming conventions for the elements themselves, they should go across the entire project, across all the stakeholders, across all disciplines and all dimensions, right, in the BIM environment. Now, when it comes to standards and codes, I also do believe that each discipline, each specialization in the project should have their own, because they will be looking at different classification ways, different ways of classifying the project material. So I've seen in David, in your survey, you were referring to classification codes as Uniclass. Uniclass, for me, that's a design coding system. That's for classifying elements that are in the design. Now my question, when it comes to cost, we should have, and we need to have different cost breakdowns. And I do believe that time planners and facility management and operation stakeholders, they will need to have different standard systems. Now, how do we make all these standard systems and different classification codes to map to each other, so we are still linking them and making this connection network in between things, at the same time as providing a breakdown that is actually useful for the outcome of the information we are going to process from the different specializations that are working on the BIM environment.
Yeah. We do just sorry, I was only just going to try and add a bit there. We do only ask kind of one question on classification specifically, so it's kind of limited amount of information that we have back on that one. But we do, at NBS, we do enable and try and encourage people to use classification and connected information between their design models and the specification. So certainly in terms of those types of information, we see that happening, and customers that we work with doing that. But in terms of how far that extends into cost management and that side of things, I'm not so sure about it. I don't know as much about that area, but the survey unfortunately doesn't kind of go into that level of detail. So yeah, that's an interesting point.
Just in the last few minutes, I did want to bring up a question in relation to the talk that you gave, Elia, in diversity and how we go about engaging a more diverse group of people in the industry, because clearly from all the talks there's a problem. There's a low participation of diverse groups of people in the industry, and there's a low participation of quantity surveyors, as you've said, and the thought of so I mean, clearly the problem is evident, but what's the solution? How do are people waiting for permission? Are young people waiting for permission to participate, or females waiting for permission to participate, or special?
I do think you need to have a reference. You need to have a precedent. When you think it's something normal, you are not gonna stand out, and that not everybody likes to be the only one in the room, and I totally understand that. And so by making it the norm, you will feel that you are not breaking.
Who makes it the norm? That's what I'm asking.
Making the norm is about visualizing that there is a lot of people already out there, that there is it's about highlighting that the sector is being represented, and that it is something normal. Right now it is not, because there is no visibility of it, and as the survey shows, it really, we are only 22%, and that goes to all different minorities involved in the teams, right? So but let's fake that, let's make it more visible, and doing that, you encourage people to actually feel welcome and feel involved and feel comfortable to become a part of it.
Yeah,
I think it's the problem is it's a mindset and it's a culture change, and it's really a culture change. When I started quantity surveying, only 2% of the quantity surveyors were actually women. So we have moved a long way, but at an awful slow pace. And construction is completely perceived as being a male-dominated world. And like, I went to a hairdresser recently, and her idea of construction is made out on the site. And she was a young person, but her idea of construction is not, you know, it's set in time. Whereas I know we've moved on. I know we've moved on considerably, but we don't have enough. We need to have laws to change it. We need to change it because, as I say, 50% of the world is women, but also because diversity, as McKinsey will show, brings huge profits, huge, it brings a lot to the industry. So it's mindset. I think it's culture and mindset, basically. And I think that's what we need to change.
Very good. Well, we're running out of time, and just wanted to thank all three of the speakers for your contributions. We could probably continue this talk for another hour. It's fascinating. But it's, I think the key message out of all this is to encourage everybody to participate in this great industry, because of course it's the only industry that's building real value for everybody. Like, there's not a single person in the world that doesn't benefit from infrastructure. It's where we live, work, sleep, where our children go to school, where we care for people, where we do our shopping, everything. There's not an aspect of your life that doesn't somehow involve the built environment. And so it's a fascinating industry. It's when people participate, we're doing something meaningful and useful for the whole world. So we do want to encourage people to get involved, and more people. So thank you, all of you, for your great contributions to this conference, and we'll hand it back to the organizers.